Zoroastrianism is among the oldest continuously practiced religions in human history. It emerged from the ancient Iranian plateau sometime between 1500 and 600 before the Common Era. Scholars still debate this dating, but the ideas themselves have proven extraordinarily resilient and influential. What makes this tradition remarkable is not merely its age, but its revolutionary philosophical architecture. Before Zoroaster, the prevailing religious frameworks were largely polytheistic and cyclical in their understanding of time. Zoroaster introduced something genuinely new, a linear conception of history moving toward a definite end. He proposed that existence itself has a purpose, a direction, and an ultimate resolution. This was not simply theology, but a complete restructuring of how humans could understand reality. The tradition centers on one supreme creator deity called Ahura Mazda, meaning the wise Lord. This deity created the universe through thought itself, through conscious intention and purposeful design. But Ahura Mazda is opposed by a destructive force called Angra Mainyu, the hostile or destructive spirit. This opposition generates what scholars call dualism, the idea that reality contains fundamental competing principles. Yet Zoroastrian dualism is not eternal or absolute in the way many assume. The religion teaches that good will ultimately triumph completely over evil, ending the conflict forever. This eschatological vision, this doctrine of final things, may be humanity's first systematic apocalypticism. We find traces of it throughout later religious traditions, from Judaism to Christianity to Islam. Zoroastrianism also introduced something philosophically profound, the doctrine of radical free will. Humans are not pawns of divine forces, but active moral agents who shape cosmic outcomes. Every thought, word and deed either strengthens truth and order or feeds chaos and destruction. This places extraordinary ethical weight on ordinary human choices and daily conduct. The tradition thus merges cosmology with ethics in a uniquely integrated philosophical system. Understanding this system reveals foundational structures underlying much of Western religious and moral thought. We will explore every dimension of this tradition with intellectual rigor and clarity. We begin with origins and historical context, then move through core concepts and doctrines. We will examine the scholarly debates, the competing interpretations, and the genuine uncertainties. We will trace how these ideas influenced other traditions while acknowledging where evidence remains circumstantial. This is not mythology presented as fact, but philosophy examined through evidence and reasoning. The goal is genuine understanding of ideas that shaped billions of lives across 3 millennia. Part 1. The Prophet and His World. Zoroaster, known in his native Avestan language as Zarathustra Spitama, remains a historically elusive figure. Western scholarship has dated him anywhere from 6000 before the Common Era to 600 before it. The most rigorous linguistic analysis places him between 1500 and 1000 before the Common Era. This dating emerges from studying the archaic language of the Gathas, his hymns and teachings. The Gathas represent the oldest and most authentic stratum of Zoroastrian scripture. Their language closely resembles the Sanskrit of the oldest Vedic texts, suggesting shared cultural origins. Zoroaster was likely born in the northeastern Iranian plateau, possibly near modern Uzbekistan or Afghanistan. He came from a priestly family and was trained in the ritual traditions of his culture. The society he inhabited was pastoral and semi-nomadic, organized around cattle herding. This explains why cattle and pastoral imagery pervade his religious vocabulary and symbolism. His world was populated by numerous deities, some benevolent and others violent and chaotic. The Indo-Iranian religious tradition he inherited divided divine beings into two broad categories. The first category was the Ahuras, meaning lords, associated with cosmic order and beneficial forces. The second was the Daivas, divine beings who delighted in conflict, violence and strife. Zoroaster's religious revolution involved rejecting the Daivas as false gods deserving condemnation. He proclaimed that only Ahura Mazda, the wise lord, deserved worship as supreme deity. This represented a dramatic theological break from the polytheistic norms of his culture. He was not merely adding a god, but reordering the entire divine hierarchy around ethical principles. According to tradition, Zoroaster received his revelation at approximately age 30. He went to draw water for a ritual and emerged having experienced a vision. This vision introduced him to Vohu Mana, meaning good mind, one of 7 divine emanations. Vohu Mana then led him to the other 6 emanations and to Ahura Mazda himself. The experience transformed his understanding of reality and launched his prophetic mission. He spent years teaching with little success, gaining initially only one convert, his cousin Maidyo Manha. The Oxford Dictionary of Philosophy ranks Zoroaster first in its chronology of philosophers. This recognition reflects his genuinely philosophical innovations beyond merely religious teachings. He moved religious thought from myth toward rational ethical reflection and systematic doctrine. The word Mazda itself means wisdom, so his religion translates as worship of wisdom. Greek observers later noted this connection, calling followers of Zoroaster lovers of wisdom. The term philosopher, which means the same thing in Greek, may owe something to this Persian precedent. Zoroaster's teachings eventually gained royal patronage under a king named Vishtaspa. This patronage proved crucial for spreading the religion across Iranian territories. Without political support, his revolutionary ideas might have remained a marginal sectarian movement. Instead, Zoroastrianism became the dominant faith of successive Persian empires for over a millennium. The Achaemenid Empire, under Cyrus the Great, established it as imperial religion around 550 before the Common Era. This empire stretched from Egypt to India, creating unprecedented channels for idea transmission. The historical significance here cannot be overstated in understanding religious history. When Cyrus conquered Babylon in 539, before the Common Era, he freed the Jewish captives there. Jewish populations thus lived under Zoroastrian imperial rule for centuries afterward. They encountered Persian ideas about angels, demons, resurrection, final judgment, and cosmic dualism. Scholars debate how much Judaism borrowed from Zoroastrianism during this period. The similarities are striking, but proving direct influence versus independent development remains methodologically difficult. The ancient Greeks were also deeply fascinated by Zoroaster and Persian religious thought. Some sources claim Pythagoras studied with Zoroastrian priests, though this remains historically uncertain. Plato mentions Zoroaster by name and reportedly received a Persian magus visitor late in life. The philosopher Heraclitus, famous for his doctrines of flux and fire, shows possible Zoroastrian influences. His emphasis on fire as cosmic principle and opposites as fundamental mirrors, Zoroastrian themes. These connections suggest Zoroastrianism participated in the broader intellectual exchanges of the ancient world. Understanding Zoroaster requires grasping the cultural revolution he initiated against prevailing norms. The Daivas he rejected were worshipped as gods in related Vedic Indian tradition. The Sanskrit word deva, meaning god, is linguistically identical to the Avestan daiva, meaning demon. Similarly, the Vedic asura, meaning demon, corresponds to the Avestan ahura, meaning lord and god. Zoroaster essentially inverted the existing divine hierarchy based on ethical rather than ritual criteria. Gods who promoted violence and strife became demons regardless of their traditional status. This ethical reorientation represents one of the earliest known applications of moral reasoning to theology. Zoroaster did not ask which gods were powerful, but which gods were good. He judged divine beings by their effects on cosmic order and human welfare. Those promoting truth, order, and creativity deserved worship as truly divine beings. Those promoting chaos, destruction, and deception deserved rejection as ultimately demonic forces. The criterion for divinity became moral character rather than mere supernatural power. Zoroaster's revolutionary insight was that the universe itself has an ethical structure. Reality is not morally neutral, but organized around the opposition between truth and falsehood. This opposition is called Asha versus Druj in Avestan terminology. Asha means truth, order, righteousness, and the way things ought to be. Druj means lie, chaos, deception, and the violation of proper order. These are not merely human ethical categories, but cosmic principles structuring all existence. The concept of Asha derives from the Proto-Indo-Iranian word for truth or proper joining. Its Vedic Sanskrit cognate is Rita, which similarly means cosmic order and proper arrangement. This shared etymology demonstrates that Zoroaster drew on deep Indo-Iranian religious traditions. But he developed these concepts in distinctly new directions with unprecedented moral emphasis. For Zoroaster, Asha was not just descriptive of how things are, but prescriptive. It demanded active human participation in maintaining and strengthening cosmic order. The material world itself, according to Zoroaster, was created to trap and ultimately defeat evil. Ahura Mazda created physical reality as an arena for the cosmic struggle against Angra Mainyu. This means the physical world is fundamentally good, not fallen or inherently corrupt. Matter and spirit are not opposed as in later Gnostic or Manichaean dualistic systems. Zoroastrianism thus affirms embodied existence as part of the divine plan against evil. Fasting, celibacy and world rejection are actually prohibited as violations of proper religious practice. This world-affirming theology had profound implications for ethics and social organization. Active participation in life through productive work and family was religious duty. Withdrawal from society was not holiness, but abandonment of the cosmic struggle against evil. Agriculture, prosperity and happiness were not distractions from spirituality, but expressions of it. The good Zoroastrian engaged with the world, contributed to community welfare and built civilization. This ethical stance distinguished Zoroastrianism from many ascetic traditions that emerged elsewhere. Zoroaster also taught that time itself has a structure and direction unlike anything proposed before. Earlier religious traditions conceived time as cyclical, endlessly repeating without ultimate resolution. Zoroaster introduced linear time, moving from creation through mixture toward final separation. The present age is the period of mixture where good and evil coexist and struggle. But this mixture is temporary, and history moves toward a definitive end called frashokereti. This final renovation will restore creation to its original purity and defeat evil permanently. This linear eschatology transformed how humans could understand their place in cosmic history. Every action in the present contributes to or detracts from the eventual victory of good. Human choices are not cosmically insignificant, but participate in the ultimate outcome of existence. This gave ordinary life an unprecedented gravity and moral seriousness. The stakes of daily choices extended beyond individual consequences to cosmic significance. Zoroaster thus created what might be called the first fully historical consciousness in religion. Part 2. The Architecture of the Divine. Ahura Mazda stands at the apex of Zoroastrian theology as the uncreated creator of all existence. The name itself combines two Avestan words, Ahura meaning Lord and Mazda meaning wisdom. This deity is not merely powerful but fundamentally characterized by conscious, purposeful intelligence. Zoroaster sometimes separates these attributes and sometimes combines them into unified reference. The emphasis on wisdom as divine essence distinguishes this theology from traditions emphasizing raw power. Ahura Mazda creates through thought itself, bringing existence into being through mental intention. In the Gathas, Ahura Mazda is described as creating the universe with his thought alone. This cosmogony parallels later philosophical concepts of divine intellect as creative principle. The universe emerges not from physical processes, but from purposeful cognitive activity. This suggests that mind or consciousness is more fundamental than matter in the structure of reality. Some scholars see here an early form of philosophical idealism predating Greek developments. The parallel with Platonic forms and the Neoplatonic one is not accidental given historical connections. Ahura Mazda works through emanations called the Amesha Spentas, meaning bounteous or holy immortals. These are 7 divine entities representing different aspects of the Creator and creation. They are not independent deities, but extensions of Ahura Mazda's own being and purpose. Each personifies an abstract divine quality while also governing a physical element of creation. This dual nature unites spiritual concepts with material reality in a uniquely Zoroastrian synthesis. The Amesha bridge heaven and earth, making abstract virtues tangible and actionable. The first and often foremost Amesha is Vohu Mana, meaning good mind or good purpose. This entity represents divine wisdom, illumination, love, and the capacity for right thinking. Vohu Mana guided Zoroaster's soul to heaven and welcomes the blessed into paradise after death. He presides over cattle and domestic animals in the physical realm of correspondences. Believers are told to bring Vohu Mana into their earthly lives through profound love and wisdom. This Amesha thus connects cognitive virtue with practical compassion and right relationship. The second Amesha is Asha Vahishta, meaning best truth or excellent order. This entity represents the lawful order of the cosmos, according to which all things properly happen. Asha Vahishta presides over fire, which Zoroastrians consider sacred as the inner nature of reality. Fire symbolizes truth because it illuminates, purifies, and cannot be corrupted or made false. In the 238 verses of the Gathas, Asha appears 157 times, more than any other concept. This frequency demonstrates how central truth and order are to Zoroastrian religious consciousness. The third Amesha is Kshatra Vairya, meaning desirable dominion or good power. This entity represents the power of Ahura Mazda's kingdom and righteous authority over creation. Kshatra Vairya presides over metals in the physical realm and represents proper governance. Believers realize this power through action guided by excellent order and good mind together. The concept connects spiritual authority with material resources and legitimate political power. Later, Zoroastrian texts elaborate this into a complete political theology of righteous kingship. The fourth Amesha is Spenta Almaiti, meaning beneficent devotion or holy piety. This female entity represents religious devotion, faith, and proper orientation toward the divine. She presides over the earth itself and is associated with fertility, nurture, and receptivity. Spenta Almaiti guides and protects believers while representing the ideal of devoted service. Her connection to earth reflects Zoroastrianism's affirmation of material creation as sacred. The feminine divine principle here integrates spirituality with physical fruitfulness and care. The fifth and sixth Amesha are often mentioned together as complementary sisters. Harvatat means wholeness, health and perfection, presiding over water in physical creation. Ameritat means immortality and long life, presiding over plants and vegetation. These two represent the rewards awaiting those who cultivate the other Amesha qualities. Water and plants sustain physical life just as wholeness and immortality sustain spiritual existence. Together they symbolize complete flourishing in both material and transcendent dimensions. The seventh member of the divine heptad is Spenta Mainyu, the holy or bounteous spirit. This entity occupies a complex position in Zoroastrian theology with multiple interpretations. Some texts present Spenta Mainyu as the active creative principle through which Ahura Mazda acts. Others identify Spenta Mainyu more directly with Ahura Mazda himself in creative mode. Through Spenta Mainyu, the Creator is immanent in creation and present within human beings. This concept allows transcendent deity to engage intimately with the material world and humanity. Spenta Mainyu has a twin brother named Angra Mainyu, the destructive or hostile spirit. These twins represent the fundamental choice between creation and destruction, truth and falsehood. In the Gathas, they are described as primordial beings who chose their respective natures. Spenta Mainyu chose life, truth, and alignment with Asha at the beginning of existence. Angra Mainyu chose death, falsehood, and opposition to proper order and goodness. Their choice established the cosmic conflict that structures all subsequent existence and history. This twin mythology raises profound questions about the origin and nature of evil. Did Ahura Mazda create Angra Mainyu? And if so, is he responsible for evil? The Gathas suggest the twins chose their natures through their own free decisions. Evil thus originates not from divine creation, but from a primordial choice against goodness. This preserves Ahura Mazda's perfect goodness while explaining evil's presence in the world. The solution anticipates later philosophical debates about free will and the problem of evil. Below the Amesha Spentas exists another class of divine beings called the Yazatas. This term means ones worthy of worship and denotes beneficent spiritual beings assisting Ahura Mazda. The Yazatas help maintain cosmic order and fight against the forces of evil and destruction. They include figures like Mithra, who presides over covenants, and Anahita, associated with waters. Some Yazatas correspond to deities worshipped in the earlier Indo-Iranian religious tradition. Zoroaster retained these figures while subordinating them clearly to Ahura Mazda's supreme authority. The Yazatas became particularly important for understanding Zoroastrianism's complex theological status. Is the religion monotheistic with one god, or polytheistic with many gods? Scholars have proposed it is henotheistic, worshipping one supreme deity while acknowledging others. Others suggest it combines monotheistic, polytheistic, and pantheistic elements simultaneously. The most accurate description may be that Zoroastrianism has its own unique form of monotheism. The Yazatas are not independent deities, but emanations and instruments of the one Creator. Each human being also possesses a spiritual component called the Fravashi, or higher spirit. The Fravashi exists prior to physical birth and participates in maintaining creation alongside Ahura Mazda. At birth, a portion called the Urvan, or soul, incarnates into the physical body. During life, the Fravashi serves as inspiration toward good actions and spiritual protection. The Fravashis of ancestors can be venerated and called upon to aid the living. This creates a spiritual community spanning generations and linking living and dead in shared purpose. The theological architecture thus presents a layered spiritual reality of remarkable sophistication. At the apex stands Ahura Mazda, uncreated and ultimate source of all goodness and truth. Emanating from him are the 7 Misconceptions, personifying divine attributes and governing creation. Below them serve the Yazatas, spiritual beings maintaining order and combating evil forces. Each human contains a Fravashi, connecting them to this spiritual hierarchy and cosmic purpose. Opposing all of this stands Angra Mainyu with his demons and forces of destruction and chaos. This structure influenced later religious conceptions of angelic hierarchies in significant ways. Judaism developed elaborate angelology during and after the Persian period of influence. Christianity inherited and expanded these concepts into complex hierarchies of angels and archangels. Islam similarly presents detailed angelic orders serving divine purposes and opposing demonic forces. The Misconceptions specifically parallel the archangel concept found in these later traditions. Whether direct borrowing or parallel development occurred remains a matter of scholarly debate. The physical creation itself is understood as fundamentally good and purposeful in this system. Ahura Mazda created 7 primary elements as the material foundation of the universe. Each Misconception guards and corresponds to one of these foundational physical creations. Sky, water, earth, plants, animals, humanity and fire constitute the basic structure of reality. This correspondence between spiritual virtues and material elements unifies the cosmic order. Nothing in proper creation exists without meaning, purpose, and connection to divine intention. The world exists in 2 fundamental modes called Menog and Getig in later Zoroastrian terminology. Menog refers to the invisible spiritual and mental realm where ideas and intentions originate. Getig refers to the visible material realm where spiritual realities take physical form. These are not opposed realms, but complementary aspects of the same integrated creation. The Menog is like an architect's blueprint, while the Getig is the constructed building. Both are necessary for complete reality, and neither is superior or inferior to the other. Some scholars see parallels between Menog and Plato's realm of ideal forms, or universals. The suggestion that Plato learned from Zoroastrian sources has historical plausibility given known contacts. Ionian Greek philosophers, including Pythagoras and Heraclitus, reportedly studied with Persian magi. Plato travelled extensively during his formative years and mentions Zoroaster in his dialogues. A Persian magus reportedly visited Plato in Athens during the philosopher's final days. These connections suggest possible transmission of ideas between Persian and Greek philosophical traditions. The concept of Menog also anticipates aspects of modern physics in interesting, if speculative, ways. Quantum mechanics reveals that at subatomic levels, reality behaves more like waves than particles. The solid material world emerges from underlying vibrational patterns we cannot directly observe. This loosely parallels the Zoroastrian view of visible reality emerging from invisible spiritual templates. Such parallels are suggestive rather than rigorous, but indicate the tradition's philosophical depth. Zoroastrian metaphysics grasped the distinction between appearance and underlying structure remarkably early. Part 3. Asha and Druj. Asha represents the most fundamental concept in the entire Zoroastrian philosophical system. The word carries multiple interconnected meanings that resist simple translation into English. At its core, Asha means truth, but this truth extends far beyond merely accurate statements. It encompasses cosmic order, righteousness, the way things properly are and ought to be. Asha is simultaneously descriptive of reality's structure and prescriptive of proper action. Everything that exists rightly, functions properly, and fulfills its purpose embodies Asha. The concept derives from Proto-Indo-Iranian roots, meaning properly joined or right arrangement. Its Vedic Sanskrit cognate is Rita, which similarly denotes cosmic order and natural law. This shared etymology demonstrates that Zoroaster built upon ancient Indo-Iranian religious concepts, but he developed Asha into something more explicitly ethical and personally demanding than Rita. For Zoroaster, Asha was not merely how the universe operates, but how humans must act. Aligning with Asha requires conscious choice and active participation in maintaining cosmic order. Asha manifests in multiple dimensions of existence simultaneously and interconnectedly. In the physical realm, Asha is the regular motion of celestial bodies and seasonal cycles. It is the pattern of sunrise and sunset, the reliable order underlying natural phenomena. In the social realm, Asha is justice, proper contracts, and truthful speech between persons. In the moral realm, Asha is righteousness, the quality of actions that accord with divine intention. In the spiritual realm, Asha is the very nature of Ahura Mazda and the structure of existence. The opposite of Asha is Druj, meaning lie, falsehood, deception, and chaos. Druj is not merely incorrect information, but active violation of proper order and arrangement. Where Asha represents creation, truth, and life, Druj represents destruction, falsehood, and death. Druj is associated with Angra Mainyu and constitutes his essential nature and mode of operation. Everything that corrupts, decays, or violates proper function manifests the principle of Druj. The cosmic struggle between Asha and Druj underlies all existence and every human choice. This opposition should not be confused with Western and Christian notions of good versus evil. The Asha versus Druj framework is more systemic and less personal than typical moral dichotomies. It represents order opposing chaos, creation opposing destruction, truth opposing falsehood. The conflict operates at cosmic, natural, social, and psychological levels simultaneously. Personal moral choices participate in this cosmic structure but do not exhaust its meaning. The framework is ontological, concerning the very nature of being, not merely ethical. Druj is technically uncreated, just as Angra Mainyu himself is uncreated alongside Ahura Mazda. This means evil and chaos are not products of divine creation gone wrong. Ahura Mazda created only good things, and Druj exists as the negation and opposition to creation. Druj is literally nothing in the sense of being anti-creation and the absence of proper being. This view has parallels with later theological positions treating evil as privation rather than substance. Augustine's influential Christian theodicy similarly treats evil as absence of good rather than positive existence. The created world exists as an arena for the conflict between these two cosmic principles. Ahura Mazda made physical creation specifically to trap and ultimately destroy the forces of Druj. By manifesting Angra Mainyu in material form, the creator can defeat him definitively. This explains why the physical world, despite containing suffering, is fundamentally good and purposeful. Material existence is not a fall from spiritual purity, but a strategic divine action. The suffering caused by Druj is temporary and will be eliminated in the final renovation. Fire holds special significance as the physical symbol and manifestation of Asha. Fire illuminates darkness, purifies what it touches, and cannot itself be made impure. These qualities make it the ideal sensory representation of truth and proper order. Zoroastrians do not worship fire itself, but use it as a focus for worship of Ahura Mazda. Gazing upon fire is considered being in the presence of divine truth and wisdom. Fire temples maintain perpetual flames as sacred centers for prayer and religious practice. Water similarly represents Asha's purifying and life-giving properties in physical creation. Both fire and water are considered life-sustaining agents of ritual and spiritual purity. Zoroastrian purification ceremonies involve both elements in complementary cleansing processes. The culminating rite of the central worship ceremony involves strengthening the sacred waters. Fire provides insight and wisdom, while water provides the source from which wisdom flows. Together they represent the dual aspects of truth as illumination and as life itself. Human beings occupy a unique position in the cosmic struggle between Asha and Druj. Unlike natural elements that simply follow their nature, humans must consciously choose their alignment. This choice constitutes the core of human moral responsibility and spiritual significance. Every thought, word and deed either strengthens Asha or feeds and enables Druj. Humans are not passive observers of cosmic conflict, but active participants shaping outcomes. The cumulative weight of human choices contributes to the eventual victory of good over evil. The threefold path of Asha summarizes human moral duty in three connected dimensions. Humata means good thoughts, the cultivation of truthful, wise, and benevolent mental states. Hukta means good words, speaking truth, avoiding deception, and using language righteously. Huvashta means good deeds, acting in ways that strengthen order and benefit creation. These three are inseparable, each supporting and enabling the others in integrated practice. Thought without action is incomplete, and action without right thought is dangerous and misguided. The prayer called Ashem Vohu ranks among the most sacred and frequently recited Zoroastrian texts. It declares that righteousness is the highest virtue and brings happiness to the righteous. Crucially, it specifies that one should be righteous for the sake of righteousness itself. This means proper motivation cannot be desire for reward or fear of punishment. True alignment with Asha requires wanting truth and order because they are intrinsically good. This represents remarkably sophisticated ethical thinking about motivation and moral character. Being good for goodness' sake, rather than for personal benefit, resembles Kantian ethical philosophy. Immanuel Kant argued that moral worth comes from acting from duty rather than inclination or interest. The parallel suggests Zoroastrian ethics anticipated key insights of later philosophical traditions. Whether Kant knew Zoroastrian text remains unclear, but the structural similarity is striking. Both traditions insist that genuine virtue requires proper motivation beyond self-interested calculation. Ethics becomes a matter of character and orientation rather than mere behavioral compliance. The concept of Asha also has ecological and environmental dimensions worth noting. Because physical creation is good and purposeful, humans have duties toward the natural world. Water, earth, fire, and air are sacred elements requiring protection and respectful treatment. Some scholars call Zoroastrianism the first ecological religion because of this environmental ethic. The Avesta contains explicit calls to protect natural elements as divine emanations. Reverence for yasatas emphasizes preservation of the nature they embody and govern. Violations of Asha constitute violations against creation itself and against Ahura Mazda. Lying is not merely socially harmful, but cosmically destructive, feeding the forces of chaos. Pollution of water or earth is not just practically problematic, but spiritually wrong. Breaking contracts violates the sacred trust that Mithra, the Yasata of covenants, oversees. Every unethical act weakens the cosmic order and strengthens the adversary of all existence. This framework gives ordinary morality extraordinary weight and cosmic significance. The person who masters alignment with Asha is called an Ashavan, possessing or mastering truth. Becoming an Ashavan represents the highest spiritual achievement and human purpose in life. The Ashavan contributes maximally to the cosmic battle and prepares their soul for judgment. Their thoughts, words and deeds consistently strengthen order, truth and divine intention. They become living embodiments of the very principle that structures and sustains existence. This goal gives human life clear direction and ultimate meaning within cosmic purpose. Part 4. The problem of evil and radical free will. Every theistic tradition must confront the problem of evil in some form. If God is all-powerful and perfectly good, why does suffering and wickedness exist? This challenge has haunted religious philosophy from ancient times to contemporary debates. Zoroastrianism offers a distinctive solution that differs significantly from other major traditions. Understanding this solution illuminates both its philosophical power and its conceptual costs. The Zoroastrian approach influenced later theodicies while maintaining its own unique structure. Most monotheistic traditions claim God is omnipotent, possessing unlimited power over everything. This creates the classic dilemma. An all-powerful God could prevent evil, but apparently does not. Either God lacks the power to stop evil, the will to stop it, or the knowledge of it. Each option seems to diminish the divine in ways believers find theologically unacceptable. Zoroastrianism sidesteps this trilemma by denying absolute divine omnipotence from the start. Ahura Mazda is supremely good and wise, but faces genuine opposition limiting his immediate power. Angra Mainyu exists independently as an uncreated spirit opposing Ahura Mazda and his creation. This adversary genuinely limits what Ahura Mazda can accomplish, at any given moment. Evil exists because a real cosmic force actively produces it, not because God permits it. Ahura Mazda is doing everything possible to combat evil and will eventually triumph completely. But the victory requires time, struggle, and the participation of all good beings, including humans. This framework preserves divine goodness while honestly acknowledging the reality of evil and suffering. Scholars debate whether this constitutes genuine metaphysical dualism with two ultimate principles. If both Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu are uncreated, neither seems more fundamental than the other. This would make Zoroastrianism dualistic in a strong sense, with two co-eternal cosmic powers. But the tradition insists that good will definitively triumph, ending evil's existence entirely. This asymmetry suggests good is ultimately superior, even if evil is currently powerful and real. The dualism is temporal and will be resolved rather than eternal and metaphysically necessary. Some interpreters argue Ahura Mazda is ultimately the only true reality and source of existence. Angra Mainyu is uncreated but represents negation, chaos, and the absence of proper being. Evil is thus parasitic on good, unable to exist independently without something to corrupt. This view brings Zoroastrianism closer to later Augustinian theodicy, treating evil as privation. The tradition itself may have developed different emphases at different historical periods. Scholars continue debating which interpretation best represents original Zoroastrian teaching. The Zurvanism controversy illustrates tensions within the tradition over these metaphysical questions. Zurvanism was a variant teaching that both spirits emerged from a single source called Zurvan. Zurvan, meaning infinite time, would be the true ultimate principle transcending the twin spirits. This solved certain theological problems, but created others equally serious for the tradition. If time is ultimate, human choices might be predetermined rather than genuinely free. Orthodox Zoroastrianism rejected Zurvanism as heresy threatening core doctrines of moral responsibility. Free will constitutes the absolute center of Zoroastrian ethics and its understanding of human nature. Unlike traditions emphasizing divine predestination, Zoroastrianism insists on radical human freedom. Ahura Mazda created humans with genuine capacity to choose between good and evil. This choice is not merely apparent, but metaphysically real and consequential for cosmic outcomes. No divine being, not even Ahura Mazda himself, can or will override human moral decisions. Each person bears complete responsibility for their alignment with Asha or Druj. The Gathas describe even the primordial spirits as having chosen their respective natures. Spenta Mainyu chose life, truth and righteousness, while Angra Mainyu chose death and falsehood. This choice was genuinely free, not predetermined or forced by any external power. If even cosmic spirits must choose their moral orientation, human choice is equally authentic. The capacity for choice is built into the fundamental structure of conscious existence itself. Freedom is not a human peculiarity, but a feature of all morally significant beings. This doctrine of free will serves as the mechanism connecting human action to cosmic outcomes. Because choices are genuine, they genuinely contribute to either strengthening or weakening Asha. The eventual victory of good depends partly on accumulated human decisions across history. This gives individual moral choices significance far exceeding their immediate personal consequences. Every truthful word spoken strengthens the cosmic order against chaos and destruction. Every lie told feeds the adversary and delays the final renovation of creation. Zoroastrianism's rejection of predestination distinguishes it sharply from later Islamic Jabarite doctrines. Some Islamic theologians argued divine omnipotence leaves no room for genuine human agency. If God creates all events, human actions are merely divine creations, not free choices. Zoroastrianism takes the opposite position, limiting divine control to preserve human responsibility. This theological choice has profound implications for ethics, justice, and religious psychology. Believers face their moral lives as genuinely open rather than already scripted by divine will. The emphasis on free will also shaped Zoroastrianism's rejection of monasticism and ascetic withdrawal. If human choice matters for cosmic outcomes, withdrawal from the world abandons the battlefield. Active participation in life through productive work and righteous action is required of believers. Fasting and celibacy are actually prohibited as violations of the duty to engage with creation. The good Zoroastrian marries, raises children, farms land, and contributes to community welfare. Spiritual development happens through engagement with the world, not retreat from it. This world-affirming stance distinguishes Zoroastrianism from Gnostic and Manichaean dualistic traditions. Those systems treated matter as evil or fallen, something the spirit must escape. Zoroastrianism insists physical creation is good, made by the good God for good purposes. The body is not a prison for the soul, but a vehicle for righteous action in the world. Resurrection of the body, not escape from it, constitutes the final destiny of the righteous. Matter and spirit will be perfected together in the final renovation of all existence. The problem of evil receives a distinctive answer within this framework of limited divine power. Evil exists because a genuine adversary produces it, not because God fails or permits it. Suffering results from Angra Mainyu's attacks on creation and corruption of natural order. God is fighting this evil with all resources and will eventually eliminate it completely. Human suffering is real and terrible, but temporary within the larger cosmic story. The final victory of good makes present suffering ultimately meaningful rather than merely tragic. Critics might object that limiting God's power seems to diminish divine majesty and transcendence. If God cannot immediately eliminate evil, is this really the supreme being worthy of worship? Zoroastrian theology responds that moral goodness matters more than sheer power for divinity. A perfectly good God fighting evil commands more genuine reverence than an omnipotent God permitting it. The limitation is also temporary, since ultimate victory is assured and complete. God's current struggle against evil demonstrates commitment and love, rather than weakness or indifference. Another objection concerns the origin of Angra Mainyu, if not from Ahura Mazda's creation. Where did this adversary come from, if the good God did not make him? The tradition answers that both spirits are uncreated, existing eternally in primordial opposition. This may seem to multiply mysteries rather than explain them satisfactorily. Why should two uncreated spirits exist rather than one or none? Zoroastrianism offers no answer beyond asserting this as fundamental structure of ultimate reality. The philosophical depth here should not be underestimated despite unresolved metaphysical questions. Zoroastrianism identified core tensions in theistic ethics that still challenge philosophers today. The relationship between divine power, divine goodness, and evil's existence remains genuinely difficult. No solution satisfies everyone, and every tradition makes controversial metaphysical commitments. Zoroastrianism's particular combination of limited divine power and radical human freedom has enduring appeal. It takes evil seriously without blaming God and empowers humans without denying transcendent reality. Part 5. The End of All Things. Zoroastrian eschatology may represent humanity's first fully developed doctrine of last things. The term frashokereti, meaning making wonderful or renovation, names this final cosmic event. Unlike cyclical cosmologies returning endlessly to their starting points, Zoroastrianism posits a definitive end. History moves in a line from creation through mixture toward final separation and perfection. This linear time conception profoundly influenced later Jewish, Christian, and Islamic apocalypticism. The very idea that history has a goal and conclusion may originate with Zoroastrian teaching. Zoroastrian cosmology divides time into periods or ages with distinct characteristics and events. The first age is creation, when Ahura Mazda brought forth the universe in its original perfection. The second age is mixture, when Angra Mainyu invaded creation, corrupting and polluting it. The third age is separation, when good and evil are finally divided, and evil is destroyed. Later texts elaborate this into a 12,000-year framework with 4 3,000-year periods. The present world exists in the age of mixture, awaiting the coming separation and renovation. The frashokereti begins with the arrival of the Saoshyant, the cosmic savior figure. This figure is described as a descendant of Zoroaster himself, born miraculously from a virgin. According to tradition, Zoroaster's seed is preserved in a lake guarded by 99,000 spirits. At the appointed time, a virgin bathing in this lake will conceive and bear the Saoshyant. This saviour will lead the final battle against evil and initiate the resurrection of the dead. The parallels with later messianic expectations are striking and likely not coincidental. The term Saoshyant derives from an Avestan word meaning one who brings benefit or salvation. In the oldest Gathas, Zoroaster himself and his followers are called Saoshyants in this general sense. Later tradition crystallized the concept into a specific eschatological figure with cosmic role. Some texts describe 3 Saoshyants appearing at 1,000-year intervals before the final renovation. Each partially advances the cause of good until the last one achieves complete victory. This progressive eschatology influenced apocalyptic thinking across multiple religious traditions. The resurrection of the dead constitutes a central feature of the frashokereti. All humans who have ever lived will be raised in the bodies they possess before death. This is not merely spiritual survival, but full bodily resurrection and material restoration. The dead will rise and be reunited with their fravashis, their higher spirits preserved in heaven. Zoroastrianism thus taught bodily resurrection long before this doctrine appeared in Jewish texts. Scholars consider it likely that Jewish resurrection beliefs were influenced by Persian sources. Following resurrection comes the final judgment, when all humanity faces accounting for their deeds. This judgment is described as an ordeal by molten metal flowing across the entire earth. The Yazatas, Eryaman, and Attar will melt the metals in mountains and hills, creating this river. All humans, living and resurrected, must wade through this molten stream together. For the righteous, the experience will feel like walking through warm milk, painless and purifying. For the wicked, it will burn like the molten metal it truly is, causing great suffering. Crucially, this ordeal purifies rather than eternally punishes the wicked who pass through it. The suffering burns away the corruption of Druj, cleansing souls of their accumulated evil. Even those who aligned with Angramenu during life will ultimately be purified and restored. Zoroastrianism thus contains a doctrine of universal salvation through this purifying ordeal. Hell exists, but is temporary, a reformative state rather than eternal damnation. Punishments there match crimes committed, and all souls eventually join the blessed community. This universal salvation distinguishes Zoroastrian eschatology from traditions teaching eternal punishment. Christianity and Islam both develop doctrines of everlasting hell for the unrepentant wicked. Zoroastrianism's more hopeful vision sees all humanity ultimately reconciled with Ahura Mazda and truth. The river of metal accomplishes what earthly life could not for those who chose wrongly. Divine justice and divine mercy are both satisfied through temporary punishment followed by restoration. This represents a remarkably optimistic view of humanity's ultimate collective destiny. After the purifying ordeal, a great eschatological ritual takes place with cosmic significance. Ahura Mazda and the Amesha Spentas will perform a final act of worship called a yasna. They will prepare a drink called parahaoma from the white haoma plant mixed with bull fat. All the righteous will partake of this drink, which confers immortality upon them permanently. This echoes the yasna rituals performed by Zoroastrian priests throughout history as anticipatory practice. The earthly ritual prefigures and participates in the ultimate cosmic ceremony of final transformation. Following this transformation, humanity will exist in a completely renewed state of being. Bodies will become so light and refined that they will cast no shadows. There will be no need for food, hunger, thirst, or any of the biological necessities of current life. Weapons will have no purpose because no possibility of bodily injury will exist. All humanity will speak a single language and belong to a single nation without borders. Competition, conflict and separation will be replaced by unity, peace and shared purpose. This renovated existence is not merely a return to the original creation's pristine state. The Frashokariti is better than the beginning because it includes the perfected multiplicity of creation. Originally there was one plant, one animal, one human from which all others descended. The renovation preserves and perfects all the diversity that emerged through cosmic history. The end is thus richer than the beginning, incorporating all good developments since creation. History is not merely a deviation to be erased, but a genuine contribution to ultimate reality. Angra Mainyu and all forces of evil will be completely destroyed in the Frashokereti. The river of molten metal will flow into hell and annihilate the destructive spirit permanently. Evil will not be imprisoned or contained, but eliminated from existence entirely and forever. The source of chaos, suffering, decay and death will simply cease to be. This is stronger than many later apocalyptic visions where evil is merely imprisoned or contained. Zoroastrianism envisions the complete ontological elimination of the entire principle of destruction. Individual judgment also occurs at the moment of each person's death, not only at the end. The soul departs the body and travels to the Chinvat bridge, the bridge of the separator. There the soul's deeds are weighed, and its alignment with Asha or Druj is determined. For the righteous, the bridge appears wide and easy to cross, leading to paradise. For the wicked, the bridge narrows to a razor's edge from which they fall into darkness below. This individual judgment anticipates the collective final judgment while having immediate consequences. The Chinvat bridge concept influenced later traditions' conceptions of post-mortem judgment. The Islamic tradition describes a similar bridge called the Sirat, over which souls must pass. Medieval Christian visions of judgment also contain bridge imagery with similar symbolic function. The idea of immediate individual judgment coexisting with future collective judgment appears in both traditions. These parallels suggest transmission of ideas from Zoroastrian sources during periods of cultural contact. The eschatological framework shaped how billions of subsequent believers understood death and destiny. Zoroaster's innovation in introducing linear, goal-directed time cannot be overstated philosophically. Earlier religions conceived time as cyclical, endlessly repeating without ultimate resolution or meaning. This view corresponds to natural cycles of seasons, generations, and celestial patterns. Zoroaster broke from this by asserting that history moves somewhere definite and will end. This gave each moment in history unique significance as part of an unrepeatable cosmic story. The very concept of historical progress may ultimately derive from this Zoroastrian foundation. The eschatological hope shaped Zoroastrian ethics by connecting present action to ultimate outcomes. Every choice either advances or delays the coming renovation and victory of good. Human beings are not merely enduring history, but actively participating in its direction. The Frashokereti gives meaning to moral struggle by promising its successful conclusion. Without such hope, the constant battle against evil might seem endless and ultimately pointless. Eschatology thus provides the motivational structure that makes sustained ethical effort sustainable. Part 6. Ethics in Action. Zoroastrian ethics centers on active participation in life through righteousness and constructive engagement. The religion explicitly rejects monasticism, asceticism, and withdrawal from worldly affairs. Fasting and celibacy are not spiritual disciplines, but violations of proper religious practice. The good Zoroastrian engages with the world, builds family and community, and produces material benefit. This world-affirming stance follows logically from the doctrine that physical creation is fundamentally good. If Ahura Mazda made the material world good, retreating from it insults the Creator's work. The threefold path summarizes moral duty through three interconnected domains of human action. Good thoughts, good words, and good deeds together constitute the complete ethical life. These three are inseparable, each depending on and reinforcing the others continuously. Thought without expression and action remains incomplete and fails to strengthen Asha externally. Words without proper thought behind them lack authenticity and genuine moral weight. Deeds without good thought and words may accidentally help but lack conscious alignment with truth. Good thoughts begin with recognizing the fundamental distinction between Asha and Druj. The moral life requires seeing reality accurately, discerning truth from falsehood in all matters. This cognitive clarity enables proper evaluation of choices and their cosmic implications. Good thought also includes benevolence, wishing well toward creation and fellow creatures. Vohu Mana, the good mind, represents this mental orientation as a divine attribute to cultivate. Thinking well is not merely intellectual, but encompasses the entire orientation of consciousness. Good words involve speaking truth and using language to strengthen rather than corrupt order. Lying is especially condemned because it directly embodies and transmits the principle of Druj. Truthful speech maintains the fabric of social trust upon which communities depend. But good words extend beyond mere factual accuracy to include kind and helpful communication. Speech should build up rather than tear down, encourage rather than discourage proper action. The tradition recognizes language as a powerful tool that can serve either cosmic principle. Good deeds are righteous actions that actively strengthen Asha in the material world. This includes productive work, charity, care for family, and contribution to community welfare. Agricultural labor that brings forth crops from earth embodies service to good creation. Caring for cattle and animals honors the creature realm protected by Vohu Mana. Economic productivity and honest commerce strengthen the material basis for good society. The tradition celebrates worldly success achieved through righteous means as spiritual accomplishment. Charity holds special importance as a means of aligning the soul with Asha. Helping the needy and sharing resources with those who lack them strengthens cosmic order. The tradition emphasizes spreading happiness as a religious duty incumbent on all believers. This happiness is not merely emotional, but includes material welfare and genuine flourishing. Generosity combats the greed and envy that characterize alignment with Angra Mainyu. The good Zoroastrian does not hoard, but shares in ways that strengthen the entire community. Gender equality appears remarkably early in Zoroastrian ethical teaching compared to other traditions. The tradition affirms the spiritual equality and religious duty of both men and women. Both genders are capable of aligning with Asha and contributing to cosmic victory over evil. Women participate in religious rituals and bear the same moral responsibilities as men. This equality follows from the doctrine that souls transcend bodily characteristics in ultimate significance. Later patriarchal developments in Zoroastrian practice may not reflect original prophetic teaching. Fire worship, though a misnomer, describes the central role of fire in Zoroastrian ritual practice. Zoroastrians do not worship fire itself, but use it as a focal point for worshipping Ahura Mazda. Fire represents Asha, truth, and the divine presence in visible, tangible form. Gazing upon fire during prayer connects the worshipper with the cosmic order it symbolizes. Fire temples maintain sacred flames that are kept burning continuously by attending priests. Different grades of sacred fire exist, with the highest requiring elaborate consecration procedures. The yasna ritual constitutes the central act of worship in Zoroastrian religious practice. This ceremony involves priests reciting prayers, making offerings, and handling sacred implements. The ritual connects participants with Ahura Mazda and the Amesha Spentas through prescribed actions. A bundle of metal wires called the barsum symbolizes connection between mundane and spiritual worlds. The homar plant, prepared as a ritual drink, plays a central role in the ceremony. These rituals prefigure and participate in the ultimate cosmic ceremony of the Frashokereti. Purity and pollution represent important categories in Zoroastrian religious practice and daily life. Both water and fire serve as agents of ritual purity, cleansing pollution from people and objects. Dead matter is considered particularly polluting because death represents the work of Angra Mainyu. Elaborate purification ceremonies exist for those who contact corpses or other polluting substances. This concern for purity reflects the cosmic dualism between creation and corruption at the practical level. The pure body mirrors the pure soul, aligned with Asha rather than Druj. Disposal of the dead presents a unique challenge, given pollution concerns about dead matter. Traditional practice involved exposing corpses in structures called towers of silence or dachmas. Vultures would consume the flesh, preventing pollution of sacred earth, fire, or water. The bones remaining after this process would be collected and stored separately. This practice, though declining due to vulture population decreases, expressed core theological principles. Modern Zoroastrians have adopted other methods while debating their theological appropriateness. The sacred shirt called sudre and cord called kusti are worn by initiated Zoroastrians constantly. These garments serve as reminders of religious identity and commitment to the threefold path. The kusti is retied several times daily as part of regular prayer practice. Initiation, called navjote, typically occurs around age 7 to 15, depending on community. From initiation forward, the believer is expected to maintain practice and moral accountability. These external markers connect daily life to cosmic commitment and religious identity. The calendar includes multiple festivals celebrating creation, seasons, and religious commemorations. Nowruz, the Persian New Year at the spring equinox, is the most widely celebrated festival. This celebration of renewal and new beginnings predates Islam and continues in modern Iran. 6 seasonal festivals called Gahambars punctuate the year with community gatherings and worship. The Gathas, Zoroaster's own hymns, are recited during the final days before Novruz. These celebrations maintain community bonds and transmit tradition across generations. Zoroastrian ethics emphasizes that goodness should be practiced without expectation of reward. The Asham Vohu prayer specifies being righteous for the sake of righteousness itself. This means proper motivation cannot be self-interested calculation of heavenly benefits. True alignment with Asha comes from recognizing and loving goodness as intrinsically valuable. This sophisticated ethical psychology distinguishes genuine virtue from mere behavioral compliance. The tradition anticipates later philosophical debates about moral motivation and authentic character. Environmental ethics emerge naturally from Zoroastrian theology of sacred creation. The Avesta explicitly calls for protection of water, earth, fire, and air. These elements are not merely useful resources, but sacred manifestations of divine order. Pollution violates not just practical interests, but cosmic principles deserving religious respect. Some scholars identify Zoroastrianism as the first ecological religion because of these teachings. Modern Zoroastrians have emphasized this environmental dimension as increasingly relevant to contemporary concerns. The emphasis on active engagement and productive contribution shapes Zoroastrian communal life. Parsi communities in India achieve notable economic success through commerce and industry. This success reflects religious values, encouraging productive work and honest business practice. Charity and community support balance individual achievement with collective responsibility. The tradition produces engaged citizens contributing to broader societies while maintaining distinct identity. Religious values translate into worldly accomplishment without abandoning spiritual orientation. The integration of ethics with cosmic significance gives ordinary actions extraordinary meaning. Helping a neighbor strengthens Asha against Druj in the ongoing cosmic struggle. Speaking truth contributes to the eventual renovation and perfection of creation itself. Working productively honors the good creation and advances the victory of light over darkness. Every dimension of life becomes an arena for spiritual practice and cosmic participation. This unified vision of ethics, cosmology, and eschatology constitutes the Zoroastrian philosophical achievement. Part 7. The Great Transmission. The question of Zoroastrian influence on other religions generates intense scholarly debate and disagreement. Some scholars argue that Judaism, Christianity and Islam borrowed extensively from Persian sources. Others contend that similarities result from independent development or common human religious instincts. The evidence is substantial but largely circumstantial, making definitive conclusions methodologically difficult. What can be established is significant contact between Persian and Jewish populations over centuries. Understanding this contact illuminates possible channels through which ideas might have travelled. The Babylonian captivity beginning in 586 before the Common Era created the first major contact. Babylonian forces conquered Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, and deported Jewish elites to Babylon. This exile lasted nearly 50 years until the Persian conquest of Babylon in 539. Cyrus the Great, founder of the Achaemenid Empire, freed the Jewish captives and funded temple rebuilding. Jewish populations thus lived under Zoroastrian imperial rule for over 2 centuries afterward. This extended contact provided ample opportunity for exchange of religious and philosophical ideas. The Hebrew Bible itself acknowledges Persian benevolence toward the Jewish people remarkably positively. The book of Isaiah calls Cyrus the great God's anointed, using messianic language for a foreign king. Ezra and Nehemiah describe Persian support for Jewish religious restoration in favorable terms. This positive relationship suggests openness to Persian ideas rather than defensive rejection. Jews had reason to view their liberator's religion with interest and perhaps admiration. The sociological conditions for religious influence were clearly present during this period. Scholars identify several concepts that appear in Judaism after Persian contact, but not clearly before. Angelology, the developed doctrine of angels with names, hierarchies, and specific functions, expanded dramatically. Pre-exilic Hebrew texts mention angels, but without the elaborate structure found in later writings. Post-exilic texts like Daniel present named angels like Michael and Gabriel with defined cosmic roles. This parallels the Zoroastrian system of Amesha Spentas and Yazatas with remarkable structural similarity. The timing suggests possible borrowing, though independent development cannot be definitively excluded. Demonology similarly developed in Jewish thought during and after the Persian period. Earlier Hebrew texts present Satan as a title meaning accuser rather than a proper name. The figure appears as a member of the divine court testing humans rather than opposing God. Later texts develop Satan into a cosmic adversary resembling Angra Mainyu more closely. The Dead Sea Scrolls from the Essin community show particularly strong dualistic tendencies. These texts describe cosmic struggle between forces of light and darkness in Zoroastrian-like terms. Resurrection of the dead appears explicitly in Jewish texts only from the Persian period onward. Earlier Hebrew conceptions of afterlife centered on Sheol, a shadowy existence without clear differentiation. The Book of Daniel, dated to the 2nd century before the Common Era, explicitly mentions resurrection. Daniel 12 verse 2 describes many sleeping in the dust, awakening to everlasting life or shame. This concept closely parallels Zoroastrian teaching about bodily resurrection at the Frashokereti. The timing and similarity strongly suggest transmission from Persian to Jewish religious thought. Eschatology, more broadly, the doctrine of last things, developed extensively in post-exilic Judaism. Apocalyptic literature flourished during the intertestamental period between Old and New Testaments. Books like Enoch present elaborate visions of cosmic judgment, heavenly realms, and final resolution. These texts show structural parallels with Zoroastrian eschatological frameworks in numerous details. The very concept of history moving toward definitive divine judgment echoes Zoroastrian Frashokereti. Jewish apocalypticism may represent adaptation of Persian eschatological categories to Israelite tradition. The messianic concept itself shows possible Zoroastrian influence in its developed form. Earlier Hebrew texts anticipate restoration of Davidic kingship without clearly cosmic savior figures. Later expectations of a transcendent Messiah bringing final redemption parallel the Saoshyant concept. The Saoshyant, born of a virgin and descended from the prophet, initiates the final renovation. Christian application of messianic expectations to Jesus shows continuity with this developed tradition. Whether Zoroastrian influence shaped messianic expectation or vice versa remains debated among scholars. Christianity inherited Jewish apocalypticism and developed it further with additional possible Persian elements. The Book of Revelation presents cosmic struggle, final judgment, and renovated creation in vivid imagery. Scholars have documented extensive parallels between Revelation and Zoroastrian eschatological texts. The river of fire, resurrection of dead, final defeat of evil, and renewed creation all appear. Some argue Revelation is essentially Zoroastrian frashokereti with Christian characters and context. This may overstate the case, but captures genuine structural and thematic similarities. The concept of Satan in Christianity developed beyond Jewish precedents toward a more Zoroastrian model. The New Testament presents Satan as cosmic adversary of God, actively opposing divine purposes. This portrayal more closely resembles Angra Mainyu than the accuser figure of Job. The ongoing cosmic struggle between Christ and Satan parallels Zoroastrian dualistic framework clearly. Whether this represents direct borrowing or parallel development from shared Jewish sources is debated. The structural similarity remains striking regardless of precise transmission mechanisms involved. Heaven and hell as developed Christian doctrines show Zoroastrian parallels worth noting carefully. The elaborate geography of heavenly and infernal realms exceeds anything clearly present in Hebrew scriptures. Zoroastrianism had developed detailed accounts of post-mortem destinations based on moral judgment. The Chinvat Bridge and subsequent assignment to blessed or tormented states precedes Christian equivalents. Medieval Christian imagery of heaven and hell may owe more to Persian than to Hebrew sources. The transmission likely occurred through Jewish intermediaries during the intertestamental period. Islam shows Zoroastrian influence through both Jewish and Christian channels, plus direct Persian contact. The Arab conquest of the Sasanian Empire in the 7th century brought Muslims into Persian lands. Many Zoroastrians converted to Islam, bringing their religious concepts into the new faith. The Bridge of Sirat in Islamic eschatology closely parallels the Zoroastrian Chinvat Bridge. Detailed Islamic angelology reflects elaboration of concepts already developed under Persian influence. The prophet Zoroaster is sometimes identified as a legitimate pre-Islamic prophet in Muslim tradition. Greek philosophy may also have received Zoroastrian influence through documented historical contacts. Ancient sources claim Pythagoras studied with Persian magi during his extensive travels. If true, Pythagorean doctrines of cosmic harmony and dualism may have Persian roots. Heraclitus, famous for emphasizing fire and flux, shows thematic parallels with Zoroastrian teaching. His doctrine of Logos as cosmic ordering principle resembles Asha in significant respects. Whether these parallels indicate transmission or coincidence remains historically uncertain. Plato's possible knowledge of Zoroastrian teaching has generated substantial scholarly discussion. He mentions Zoroaster by name in the dialogue Alcibiades, indicating at least nominal familiarity. Reports describe a Persian magus visiting Plato in Athens during the philosopher's final years. Plato's theory of forms, with its distinction between ideal and material realms, parallels Menargetic distinction. His eschatological myths describing judgment after death echo Zoroastrian themes remarkably closely. Direct influence cannot be proven, but remains plausible given documented contacts and similarities. Scholars who emphasize Zoroastrian influence include Mary Boyce, a leading authority on the tradition. She argued that Zoroaster first taught individual judgment, heaven, hell, resurrection, and final renovation. These doctrines, she contended, entered Judaism, Christianity, and Islam through documented historical channels. Boyce considered the parallels too extensive and specific to result from independent development alone. Her view represents one end of the scholarly spectrum on this contentious question. Other distinguished scholars hold significantly more skeptical positions on transmission claims. Critics of influence theories raise several methodological objections worth serious consideration. Similarity does not prove causation, and parallel development of religious ideas occurs frequently. Dating Zoroastrian texts is notoriously difficult, making priority claims uncertain at best. The Avesta, as we have it, was compiled centuries after the supposed period of influence. Perhaps Jewish ideas influenced Zoroastrianism rather than the reverse, as some scholars propose. The direction of influence, if any occurred, remains genuinely uncertain in many cases. James Barr and other scholars argue that Zoroastrian social influence was more limited than often claimed. Direct textual connections between Zoroastrian and Jewish sources are difficult to establish firmly. Judaism maintained distinctive monotheistic commitments that resist full assimilation of dualistic frameworks. The sovereignty of the God of Israel over all creation differs from limited Zoroastrian divine power. These theological differences suggest selective adaptation rather than wholesale borrowing if influence occurred. The traditions remained distinct despite whatever exchanges may have taken place historically. The honest scholarly conclusion acknowledges genuine uncertainty while recognizing probable connections. Extended contact between Persian and Jewish populations during formative periods is historically certain. Structural parallels between developed Jewish and Zoroastrian concepts are extensive and striking. Direct textual proof of borrowing in specific instances remains elusive and probably unattainable. The most reasonable position recognizes likely influence while remaining humble about specific claims. Religious traditions interact and exchange ideas in complex ways that resist simple linear narratives. What seems clear is that Zoroastrianism participated in shaping the religious world we inherited. Whether through direct transmission, Jewish mediation, or parallel development, its ideas spread widely. Billions of people today hold beliefs about angels, demons, judgment, and resurrection. These beliefs bear family resemblance to Zoroastrian originals regardless of precise historical connections. The tradition deserves recognition as a major contributor to global religious thought and development. Its relative obscurity today belies its historical significance and continuing indirect influence. Part 8. Scholarly Controversies and Competing Interpretations. Zoroastrian studies contain numerous unresolved debates that honest treatment must acknowledge openly. Scholars disagree about fundamental questions, including dating, doctrine, and historical development. These controversies matter because different answers yield very different pictures of the tradition. Understanding the debates illuminates both what we know and the limits of our knowledge. The following surveys major controversies without pretending false certainty about contested matters. Intellectual honesty requires presenting disagreements rather than only preferred positions. The dating of Zoroaster himself remains one of the most contested questions in religious history. Traditional Zoroastrian sources place him 258 years before Alexander, around 600 before the Common Era. Greek sources fantastically date him 6,000 years before Plato, obviously legendary rather than historical. Modern linguistic analysis of the Gathas suggests composition between 1500 and 1000 before the Common Era. This earlier dating relies on the archaic character of the Avestan language in these texts. The 1,000-year range of scholarly estimates indicates genuine uncertainty about the prophet's era. The question matters because it affects assessment of Zoroastrianism's historical priority and influence. An earlier Zoroaster strengthens claims that he originated ideas later found in other traditions. A later Zoroaster opens possibilities that he borrowed from rather than influence surrounding cultures. The uncertainty means influence arguments cannot rely on firmly established chronological priority. Scholars must argue from content and context rather than simple temporal sequences. This methodological constraint limits confidence in historical transmission claims significantly. Whether Zoroastrianism is monotheistic, dualistic, or polytheistic generates ongoing scholarly disagreement. The tradition clearly centers worship on Ahura Mazda as supreme creator and source of goodness. This suggests monotheism, belief in one God as ultimate reality deserving worship. But Angra Mainyu exists as an uncreated being opposing the good God throughout cosmic history. This suggests dualism, two ultimate principles rather than one ultimate source of all reality. The Ameshaspentas and Yazatas complicate matters further as potentially divine beings. Some scholars argue Zoroastrianism is monotheistic, with dualistic ethical and cosmological dimensions. Ahura Mazda alone is truly God, while Angra Mainyu is ultimately nothing, mere negation and destruction. The Ameshaspentas are aspects or emanations of the one God, rather than separate deities. This reading minimizes the metaphysical significance of evil and emphasizes divine unity strongly. It aligns Zoroastrianism with other monotheistic traditions and may reflect apologetic concerns. Parsi communities under pressure from Christian missionaries favored such interpretations historically. Others argue Zoroastrianism is genuinely dualistic with two uncreated opposed cosmic principles. Both Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu exist eternally, neither created by the other. Their conflict structures all reality and will continue until the final renovation ends it. This reading takes the metaphysical status of evil more seriously as genuine cosmic force. It distinguishes Zoroastrianism sharply from monotheisms that derive everything from single divine source. The tradition may have oscillated between these emphases at different historical periods. Almut Hintze, a leading contemporary scholar, proposes Zoroastrianism has its own unique form of monotheism. It combines elements typically separated in Western categories of monotheism, dualism, and polytheism. Forcing it into these categories distorts its distinctive theological structure and logic. Perhaps the tradition requires its own category rather than awkward fit into existing ones. This approach respects Zoroastrianism's particularity without forcing it into inappropriate frameworks. Comparative categories may illuminate but also distort traditions that developed independently of them. The Zurvanism controversy reveals internal diversity within historical Zoroastrian thought itself. Zurvanite teaching held that both spirits emerged from Zurvan, meaning infinite time, as their source. This would make time, rather than Ahura Mazda, the ultimate principle underlying reality. The doctrine appears in various sources and apparently had significant following in some periods. Orthodox Zoroastrianism rejected Zurvanism as heresy threatening core commitments to divine goodness and freedom. The controversy shows the tradition was not monolithic, but contained competing theological tendencies. Scholars debate how widespread and influential Zurvanism actually was in Zoroastrian history. Some argue it was a major tendency, perhaps even dominant during the Sasanian period. Others contend it was a marginal deviation never accepted by mainstream tradition. The evidence is fragmentary, since Zurvanite texts were apparently suppressed by Orthodox authorities. Much of what we know comes from hostile sources or external observers rather than adherents. Reconstructing the actual beliefs and extent of Zurvanism remains speculative and contested. The impact of Greek philosophy on Zoroastrianism represents another contested scholarly question. During the Hellenistic period following Alexander's conquests, Greek and Persian cultures interacted extensively. Some Zoroastrian concepts may have been influenced by Platonic or other Greek philosophical ideas. The monogetic distinction has been compared to Platonic form-matter dualism by various scholars. Perhaps influence flowed both directions, with Greeks and Persians exchanging ideas mutually. Disentangling original Zoroastrian teaching from later Hellenistic accretions proves methodologically difficult. Martin Haug's 19th-century interpretations profoundly shaped modern understanding of Zoroastrianism. This German scholar proposed that Zoroaster taught pure monotheism, later corrupted by polytheistic additions. He reduced the Amesha Spentas to mere philosophical abstractions rather than divine beings. Parsi communities in India embraced these interpretations as defense against Christian missionary criticism. Haug's views became widely accepted as authentic Zoroastrian doctrine through this communal adoption. Later scholarship has questioned whether Haug's interpretations accurately represent original teaching. The relationship between Gathic and later Zoroastrianism generates significant interpretive disagreement. The Gathas, attributed to Zoroaster himself, represent the oldest stratum of Zoroastrian scripture. Later, Avestan texts and Middle Persian works elaborate doctrines in ways not clearly present earlier. Some scholars see continuity, with later texts explicating what was implicit in the Gathas. Others see significant development or even deviation from original prophetic teaching over time. Reformist Zoroastrians today often privilege the Gathas over later elaborations as more authentic. The Bundahishan, a 9th century Middle Persian text, provides detailed cosmological and eschatological information. It describes creation, cosmic history, and the Frashokeriti in elaborate narrative form. Scholars debate how much of this material represents ancient tradition versus later development. Some content clearly preserves very old material, not surviving in the fragmentary Avesta itself. Other elements may reflect medieval elaboration, foreign influence, or creative theological construction. Using the Bundahishan to reconstruct ancient Zoroastrianism requires careful critical judgment about sources. Reformist versus traditionalist tensions divide contemporary Zoroastrian communities on multiple issues. Reformists, more common among Western and educated Zoroastrians, emphasize the Gathas as philosophical teaching. They often downplay ritual, accept converts, and interpret tradition in modernizing directions. Traditionalists, particularly among Parsi communities, maintain strict ritual practice and ethnic boundaries. They resist conversion, emphasize hereditary religious identity, and preserve elaborate ceremonial traditions. These tensions reflect genuine theological disagreements about the nature and requirements of the faith. The conversion question particularly divides communities with significant practical implications. Can non-Zoroastrians convert to the faith, or is religious identity tied to ethnic descent? Traditionalists argue Zoroastrianism is an ethnic religion for those born into Zoroastrian families. Reformists argue the Prophet's message was universal and conversion should be welcomed. The question affects community demographics, intermarriage policies, and institutional structures significantly. Different communities have adopted different positions without consensus across the global tradition. Scholars themselves disagree about what original Zoroastrian teaching actually was on many points. Some emphasize ethical monotheism as the core message Zoroaster intended to communicate. Others emphasize ritual dimensions that remained central throughout the tradition's historical development. Still others argue Zoroaster was more priest than philosopher, concerned primarily with proper worship. The fragmentary and difficult nature of the Gathas permits multiple plausible interpretations. Scholarly consensus exists on some matters, but genuine disagreement persists on many fundamental questions. This uncertainty should not be seen as weakness, but as honest acknowledgement of evidential limits. Ancient traditions often resist the clear, definitive accounts modern readers might prefer. The honest scholar presents evidence, arguments, and alternatives rather than false certainty. Readers can evaluate competing interpretations and form their own reasoned judgments on contested matters. The tradition remains intellectually fascinating precisely because it resists easy summary and closure. Living with uncertainty about the past is part of genuine historical and religious inquiry. Part 9. Legacy and Living Tradition. Zoroastrianism survives today as a living religion practiced by communities around the world. Estimates of current adherents range from 100,000 to 200,000, depending on counting methods used. The largest communities exist in India, where Parsis have maintained the tradition for centuries. Significant populations also remain in Iran, the original homeland of the Zoroastrian faith. Smaller diaspora communities exist in North America, Europe, Australia, and elsewhere globally. Despite small numbers, the tradition maintains institutional structures, clergy, and active religious life. The Parsi community of India represents the most prominent and historically influential Zoroastrian population. Their ancestors migrated from Iran following the Arab conquest beginning in the 7th century. Facing persecution under Islamic rule, they sought refuge in the Gujarat region of western India. Local rulers granted them asylum, and they established communities that persist to this day. The name Parsi derives from Persia, indicating their Persian origin and identity. They maintained their religion while adapting to Indian cultural context over many centuries. Parsis achieved remarkable economic and social success in colonial and modern India, disproportionate to their numbers. They became prominent in commerce, industry, finance, law, and the professions generally. The Tata family, founders of major industrial enterprises, exemplifies Parsi business achievement. Parsi philanthropy has funded hospitals, schools, universities, and cultural institutions throughout India. This success reflects religious values, emphasizing productive work, honesty, and community responsibility. The tradition produced engaged citizens contributing to broader society while maintaining distinct identity. Iranian Zoroastrians faced more difficult circumstances under Islamic rule over the centuries. They experienced various degrees of discrimination, persecution, and pressure to convert to Islam. The community contracted significantly and was marginalized in the country of the religion's origin. They survived primarily in remote areas like Yazd and Kerman, where pressure was less intense. Modern Iran contains perhaps 25,000 to 30,000 Zoroastrians with constitutional minority protections. The Islamic Republic recognizes Zoroastrianism as a legitimate religion with parliamentary representation. Diaspora communities have grown as Zoroastrians migrated to Western countries seeking opportunities. North America now hosts significant Zoroastrian populations in major cities and metropolitan areas. These communities have established fire temples, religious education programs, and cultural organizations. They face challenges of maintaining tradition while adapting to very different cultural environments. Youth retention, intermarriage, and conversion questions generate ongoing communal discussion and debate. The diaspora represents both challenge and opportunity for the tradition's future development. The small population creates genuine concerns about the tradition's long-term demographic viability. Low birth rates, intermarriage, and assimilation have reduced numbers over recent generations. Some communities prohibit conversion, limiting growth to natural increase within existing families. Intermarriage with non-Zoroastrians often results in children not being raised in the faith. These demographic trends worry many community leaders about the tradition's future survival. Various responses, including acceptance of converts and outreach efforts, are debated intensely. Modern Zoroastrians have emphasized their tradition's environmental ethics as particularly contemporary relevant. The Avesta's explicit calls to protect water, earth, fire, and air resonate with ecological concerns. Zoroastrianism has been called the world's first ecological religion by some scholars and adherents. This framing positions the ancient tradition as surprisingly relevant to modern environmental challenges. Care for creation follows logically from the doctrine that the material world is divinely good. Contemporary Zoroastrians can present their tradition as prophetically anticipating ecological consciousness. The emphasis on gender equality in original Zoroastrian teaching also appeals to modern sensibilities. Both men and women bear equal spiritual responsibility and capacity for alignment with Asha. This contrasts with traditions that develop more patriarchal structures and gender hierarchies. Modern Zoroastrians can point to this equality as evidence of the tradition's progressive character. Whether historical practice always reflected this ideal equality remains a separate question, however. Traditions often fall short of their own stated principles in actual social implementation. The world-affirming character of Zoroastrian ethics distinguishes it from more ascetic religious traditions. Engagement with the world through productive work and family is religious duty, not distraction. This resonates with modern values, emphasizing accomplishment, contribution, and material well-being. Zoroastrianism does not require withdrawal from society to achieve spiritual development and progress. The integration of spiritual and material concerns appeals to those seeking holistic religious vision. Religion and ordinary life are not separate domains, but unified fields of ethical action. Academic study of Zoroastrianism has expanded significantly in recent decades with new scholarly resources. The Encyclopedia Iranica provides comprehensive, peer-reviewed coverage of Zoroastrian topics freely online. New translations of Avestan texts incorporate advances in linguistic understanding and historical knowledge. Archaeological discoveries continue illuminating the material culture of ancient Zoroastrian communities. This scholarly attention preserves and transmits knowledge even as practicing communities face challenges. The academic study ensures the tradition's intellectual legacy regardless of demographic developments. Zoroastrian themes have influenced modern culture in various ways beyond explicitly religious contexts. Friedrich Nietzsche famously employed Zarathustra as the protagonist of his philosophical work. Thus spoke Zarathustra used the prophet figure to announce the transvaluation of values and the overman. Nietzsche chose Zarathustra because he considered him the first to moralize existence systematically. The irony of using Zoroaster to overturn morality was intentional and philosophically significant. This literary appropriation introduced millions to the prophet's name, if not his actual teaching. The figure of the Magi in Christian nativity narratives connects to Zoroastrian priestly tradition. The wise men from the East who visited the infant Jesus were likely Zoroastrian priests. Their recognition of the newborn king suggests openness to truth beyond their own tradition. This detail connects Christianity to Zoroastrianism at its very origin narrative symbolically. The Magi represent the best of Persian wisdom, recognizing and honoring the Christian Saviour. Whether historical or legendary, the story preserves memory of Persian religious significance. Nowruz, the Persian New Year celebration at the spring equinox, represents living Zoroastrian cultural legacy. This festival predates Islam and continues to be celebrated across Iran and Central Asia. Millions of people participate in Nowruz traditions without necessarily identifying as Zoroastrian religiously. The celebration of renewal, spring, and new beginnings carries forward ancient Persian values. Cultural practices can preserve and transmit religious heritage beyond explicitly religious communities. Nowruz represents Zoroastrianism's continuing influence on broader Iranian and Central Asian culture. The tradition's influence on the Abrahamic religions constitutes perhaps its most significant legacy. If scholars are correct about transmission of ideas, billions of people hold Zoroastrian-influenced beliefs. Concepts of angels, demons, heaven, hell, resurrection, and final judgment may have Persian origins. The very structure of Western religious consciousness may owe more to Zoroaster than commonly recognized. This hidden influence persists regardless of whether the practicing Zoroastrian community survives demographically. Ideas can outlive the communities that originally generated and transmitted them through history. The tradition deserves attention regardless of its current demographic marginality for several reasons. Its philosophical innovations regarding ethics, cosmology, and eschatology were genuinely groundbreaking. Its influence on subsequent religious development was substantial even if debated in specific details. Its living practice by small but dedicated communities preserves irreplaceable human religious heritage. Encountering different religious frameworks enriches understanding even for those committed to other traditions. Zoroastrianism offers wisdom worth knowing regardless of whether one becomes a Zoroastrian. Part 10. Critiques, Limitations, and Common Misconceptions. Honest intellectual engagement requires acknowledging critiques, limitations, and problems with any subject. Zoroastrianism, like all religious and philosophical traditions, faces legitimate criticisms and challenges. Some criticisms reflect misunderstanding that can be corrected through accurate information. Others identify genuine difficulties that adherents and sympathizers must address thoughtfully. This final part examines both misconceptions to correct and valid concerns to acknowledge. Fair treatment presents challenges honestly rather than offering only favorable propaganda. The most common misconception identifies Zoroastrians as fire worshippers in a literal sense. This characterization, often used pejoratively, misunderstands the role of fire in Zoroastrian practice. Zoroastrians do not worship fire itself, but use fire as a focal point for worshipping Ahura Mazda. Fire symbolizes truth, purity, and divine presence, without being itself the object of worship. The misconception arose from external observers who saw fire rituals without understanding their meaning. Zoroastrians have consistently rejected this characterization throughout their history. Another misconception treats Zoroastrianism as an extinct ancient religion, rather than a living tradition. Many people familiar with the name know nothing about contemporary Zoroastrian communities and practice. The tradition continues with active religious life, functioning temples, trained clergy, and committed adherents. Assuming extinction erases real people practicing their faith in the present moment. This misconception reflects the tradition's marginality in popular awareness rather than actual facts. Recognition of living Zoroastrianism corrects this historically understandable but factually wrong assumption. Some critics argue that Zoroastrian dualism makes the religion fundamentally incoherent or problematic. If two uncreated principles exist, neither seems truly ultimate or supreme, as God should be. This appears to compromise monotheism in ways that trouble those committed to divine unity. The criticism has force and identifies a genuine theological tension within the tradition. Zoroastrian responses emphasize the asymmetry between good and evil and good's ultimate victory. But whether these responses fully resolve the tension remains philosophically debatable. The problem of evil receives a distinctive Zoroastrian answer, but this answer has its own costs. Limiting divine power to explain evil's existence may seem to diminish God inappropriately. A deity who cannot immediately eliminate evil may seem less worthy of worship than an omnipotent God. Zoroastrians respond that moral goodness matters more than sheer power for evaluating divinity. Critics may find this response inadequate, preferring traditional omnipotence despite its own difficulties. No theodicy satisfies everyone, and Zoroastrianism's solution trades one problem for others. The historical evidence for Zoroastrianism's influence on other religions remains genuinely uncertain. Strong claims about what Judaism, Christianity, or Islam borrowed rest on circumstantial evidence. Dating difficulties, textual gaps, and methodological challenges limit confidence in transmission theories. Perhaps similarities result from independent development rather than historical borrowing and influence. Scholarly honesty requires acknowledging this uncertainty rather than asserting influence as proven fact. The tradition's significance does not depend on maximalist claims about its historical influence. The dating of Zoroaster himself illustrates broader problems with sources and historical reconstruction. Estimates spanning over 1,000 years indicate that we simply do not know when he lived. This uncertainty affects assessments of priority and influence in relation to other traditions. The Avesta's fragmentary state and complex textual history complicate efforts at reconstruction further. We may never achieve the historical clarity that modern scholars and readers would prefer. Living with this uncertainty honestly is more respectable than false confidence about unknowable matters. The tradition's small size raises questions about its contemporary relevance and future viability. With fewer than 200,000 adherents, Zoroastrianism lacks the demographic weight of major world religions. Some communities prohibit conversion, limiting potential growth to natural increase alone. Intermarriage and assimilation continue reducing numbers in each successive generation. The tradition may face extinction as a living practice within the foreseeable future. This demographic reality, however tragic, represents a genuine challenge adherents must confront. The ethnic restrictions maintained by some Zoroastrian communities generate both internal and external criticism. If the Prophet's message contains universal truth, restricting it to one ethnic group seems inconsistent. Universal ethical principles should presumably be available to anyone willing to embrace them. Ethnic exclusivism appears to value bloodline over conviction, ancestry over commitment. Defenders argue that tradition has always been transmitted through families rather than conversion. Critics respond, this historical pattern need not constrain future possibilities and development. The treatment of death and corpses in traditional Zoroastrian practice raises practical and ethical questions. Exposure of bodies to vultures, while theologically grounded, creates difficulties in modern contexts. Vulture populations have declined dramatically in India, making traditional practice increasingly unworkable. Alternative methods like cremation or burial conflict with traditional prohibitions against polluting fire or earth. Communities struggle to adapt practice to changed circumstances while maintaining theological consistency. This practical challenge illustrates broader difficulties ancient traditions face in modern contexts. Some scholars argue the tradition's ethical dualism creates problematic black and white moral thinking. Dividing everything into truth versus falsehood may oversimplify genuine moral complexity and ambiguity. Real ethical situations often involve competing goods rather than simple choices between good and evil. The Asha Druj framework may not adequately capture the nuance actual moral reasoning requires. Defenders respond that the framework accommodates complexity while maintaining clear ultimate orientation. Whether this response satisfies depends on how one understands the framework's proper application. The tradition's world-affirming ethics, while appealing, may also enable problematic materialism and acquisitiveness. If productive work and prosperity are religious duties, wealth accumulation gains spiritual justification. This could potentially excuse exploitation or environmental destruction in pursuit of material success. The ecological ethics of the tradition would counter such excesses, but tensions may remain. Any world-affirming religion risks being used to justify harmful engagement with material reality. The tradition's resources for self-criticism on these points deserve examination and development. The gender equality affirmed in Zoroastrian teaching may not have been fully realized in historical practice. Like many traditions, Zoroastrianism may have espoused ideals its actual communities failed to embody. Patriarchal social structures affected Zoroastrian societies just as they affected surrounding cultures. The gap between ideal and practice represents a challenge rather than an excuse for complacency. Modern Zoroastrians can work toward fuller realization of their tradition's stated principles, but honest acknowledgement of historical shortfalls serves this goal better than idealized false history. The scholarly reconstruction of Zoroastrianism may distort as much as it illuminates the tradition. Western scholars have sometimes projected their own categories and concerns onto Persian materials. Colonial-era interpretations, shaped by Christian assumptions, influenced how the tradition was understood. Parsi communities adopted some of these interpretations in response to missionary pressure and critique. Distinguishing authentic tradition from scholarly construction and communal adaptation proves challenging. The Zoroastrianism we think we know may be partly a modern scholarly and communal creation. Despite these challenges and criticisms, the tradition retains genuine philosophical and spiritual value. Its innovations regarding ethics, cosmology, eschatology, and theodicy remain intellectually significant. Its emphasis on truth, righteousness, and cosmic responsibility offers resources for moral reflection. Its integration of spiritual and material concerns provides an alternative to dualistic world rejection. Its hopeful eschatology offers meaning and motivation for sustained ethical commitment. The tradition deserves respectful engagement with both its strengths and its genuine limitations. Approaching any tradition honestly requires seeing it whole with virtues and faults together. Zoroastrianism is neither a perfect system solving all problems, nor a primitive superstition to dismiss. It represents serious human engagement with fundamental questions about existence, meaning, and ethics. Its answers merit consideration even where they prove ultimately unsatisfying or incomplete. Learning from traditions different from our own expands understanding and enriches reflection. Zoroastrianism offers such learning to anyone willing to engage its ideas with open and critical mind. This concludes our examination of Zoroastrian ideas and philosophy in their depth and complexity. We have traced origins, doctrines, ethics, eschatology, influence, controversies, and continuing relevance. The tradition emerges as a major contributor to human religious and philosophical development. Its small contemporary size belies its historical significance and continuing indirect influence. Whether as living practice or historical legacy, Zoroastrianism deserves the attention we have given it. May this examination serve truth and understanding, the very values the tradition has always honoured.